Good morning, church. Good to see you this morning. Glad that you are here, and those that are listening by way of our telephone service. We are thankful that you are with us as well. Before I get started this morning, Suzanne and I would like to express our deep appreciation to you for those that gave to our kids for their baby that is coming. We were able to we left Friday afternoon, mid-afternoon, and spent Friday night with them and had Christmas and all that, got all that out of the way, and so that they could go on and have their baby. You know, I think my son was concerned that he wouldn't get Christmas this year, but he got it, and so he got his mom's dressing, so he was happy, and he's ready for the baby now. But they're doing well. But thank you for those that gave to the gift for them. They really appreciate it and really can put it to use. And so we thank you very much for that. William Booth was the leader and the beginner of, if you will, the originator, I guess is the correct term, for the Salvation Army. One time Booth was asked to come and speak at a particular event. And as he looked at his calendar, he told them, he said, I can't. I've already booked something else at that date and that time, and that is just an impossible time for me to come. And they said, well, if you will, just send us a word, and we would appreciate it. And they were thinking he'd write out some letter and they would read it. But he sent one word. And the word was others. You know, that really should lead us to think in a lot of ways. And that one word should mean a lot. When we think about Christianity, we should really think about the idea of others. It's God. It's the Lord. That's who we've come to worship today. And then when we think about what the Bible says about when Jesus talks about, when I asked rather, what is the greatest commandment? And he says to love the Lord God. And then he says the second's likened to it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. We realize that really Christianity is not about us, but it's about God and our service to God and our service to others. Well, in this season and in this time of year in which we are so busy exchanging gifts, and we're all at the stores. Of course, this year we're not able to be at the stores, but we're able to get on the internet and we're able to order stuff for our children and our spouses and our grandchildren and our neighbors and whoever else that we want to buy gifts for. We buy all kinds of gifts with all kinds of values. Some are just, well, I'll just grab this here and I'll get this there and I'll spend $5 on this one and $50 on this one and I'll spend this on this and this on that and we're all concerned about, getting the right gift. We don't want to lead someone inappropriately that we're not that close to, but we want to get a gift to them. And yet at the same time too, then we're thinking, okay, should we give this one and should we not give that one? And all those things are going through our heads right now. Most men are saying, no, it's not Christmas Eve and that's our department. I understand that. But there are gifts that really all of us can give all year long. While it's nice to receive a gift, Christmas, from someone that you know and someone that you love, there are gifts that really mean a lot, and mean a lot when they are given and when they are received, but they can be given every day. And most of these will not cost you anything but time. Now, some would say, well, that's a valuable commodity and we only have so much. And Paul reminds us in Ephesians 5 to redeem the time or make good use of the time. While that is true, we still have to understand that we're only stewards of everything that we have. And our relationship with others is of most importance. So what are some of these gifts that we can give to others? Well, the first gift is the gift of listening. Listening is really difficult, and few of us do it and do it well. I don't do it well. I try to do it. I don't do it well. It's said that only 20% of what is said to you, you really hear from the standpoint of listen to. Now, there's one thing to hear and there's another thing to listen. If you walk in one day and you come into my office one day, you may hear the radio on, or you may hear some sort of noise device or some device making noise. Why? I do not like absolute silence. But yet at the same time too, you might say, and sometimes, like especially if we're driving down the road and my wife will say, well, what was that song? What was playing? I don't know. It was just noise. And sometimes when folks talk to us, that's really what it is. It's just noise to our ears. But we really should learn the idea of listening to others. Now, listening takes a lot of things. It first of all takes eye contact. It takes concentration. It takes us being willing to sit down and stop and slow down, if not stop, our thoughts about us and about what we're fixing to say. And to concentrate on what that individual is saying. To concentrate on what that individual is trying to tell us. For a year, I worked in manufacturing. And one of the first lessons that my manager taught me is to stand at a machine and figure out what the machine is telling you is wrong with it. And it's not operating at that point in time. Well, I tried to tell him one day. He didn't like what I said. I said, I know what's wrong with it. He said, what? I said, I'm operating it. He didn't like that. He said, Paul, you need to figure it out. I said, yes, sir. He was a young guy. I said, yes, sir. He was very patient. I thanked him for his patience. And I was able to figure it out. And he taught me a very valuable lesson. Stop, listen, and think. That's a great gift that we can give at all times. You know, when you stop and think about that gift, that's a gift that Jesus gave, isn't it? Jesus wasn't so much about talking all the time. Oh yes, we hang on His every word. And we are appreciative of the Bibles that are what we call red letter edition, where someone has gone in and highlighted virtually in red type the words of Jesus. But there were times in which the lame, the deaf, and the blind were brought to Jesus. There were times in which Jesus sat and listened to Mary and Martha. There were those times that Jesus listened. Remember in Luke 10, when He came into their house. I imagine when Jesus told Zacchaeus to come out of the sycamore tree, for I'm going to your house today, that He didn't go just to talk, but He also wanted to sit and listen. Listening is important, isn't it, to us? John would write in the book of Revelation, chapter 2 and chapter 3, He that hath an ear to hear, as he would write to the 7 churches of Asia Minor, he that has an ear to hear, let him hear. Jesus, we know, listened, but God told us to listen to Him, didn't He? Remember, this is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased. The Mount of Transfiguration, hear Him. Matthew chapter 17. That's what God said. God said, listen. There are times of listening. That's what Solomon said in Ecclesiastes 3, isn't it? When Solomon kept talking about there's a time for this and a time for that, he says there's a time for silence and there's a time to talk. There's a time to listen to folks. Let me think and let us think for just a minute about how powerful that is and how important that is. It's valuable, isn't it? It's valuable that we sit and listen because a man who answers, if you will, a question before he hears it, Solomon said in Proverbs 18:17, it's folly to him. In other words, Solomon says, stop and think, stop and listen, stop and hear. The power is that you're telling that person that you're listening to, you're telling them, okay, you're important, and what you've got to say is important. And I want to hear what you've got to say. And so you are, if you will, passing to them value and importance and strength. You ever watch children? Children sometimes, especially if they're trying to get their mama and daddy's attention, and mama and daddy is trying to be polite because they're talking to someone, or maybe mom and daddy are engaged in something and that child is trying to get their attention. What does that child a lot of times do? Well, if they're bold, they walk up to their mom and dad and they grab their face and they turn them right to them. Listen to me. All they're saying is, I want to be heard. I want you to know what's being said. You can give the great gift of listening. Pick up on all the cues. Pick up on everything that's being said. But just listen sometimes. You don't have to talk. Just listen. Job's friends were great comforters in the beginning. They came and for 7 days they sat with him and they didn't say anything. When was the problem? When they opened their mouth, right? And they started talking. We all need to learn. Listening is important. But we can give the gift of listening all year long. And so let's give that gift to others. But then a second gift that we can give is the gift of appreciation. Expressing to folks appreciation. Being thankful to God for what we've been given. You know, we talked a lot about that in November. That was sort of our emphasis and that was our key. Colossians chapter 3, verse 15, we're to let the peace of God rule in our hearts, through which also you're called into one body, and be thankful, Paul wrote to the church at Colossae. Be thankful. To give thanks in everything, he wrote to the church at Thessalonica in 1 Thessalonians 5 and verse 18. We're to be thankful people. To express appreciation. To express appreciation, though, to others, for them, and for what they do. To express appreciation to them for maybe how they've made our day. You make people's day by, number one, listening to them. But then oftentimes we don't stop to really express appreciation to them for what they've done for us. And they may say, well, I haven't done anything for you. Well, you've been here. That's something that we're thankful for. Or you sat and listened, or you did this, or you did that. You contributed this way, you contributed that way. You helped me, and you made my day. Thank you. Paul would write to the church at Thessalonica not once, but twice. And when he wrote really both times, he began both epistles by saying that he thanked God. In 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 3, most notably though, he thanked God for them. He says, I want you to know that I'm thankful to God for you. Well, what did that do? Well, not only was he saying, I am expressing appreciation to God for you, but he allowed and was letting those folks know, I'm thankful for you. Thankful for you and for, if you go back to 1 Thessalonians chapter 1, for your faith. I'm thankful for your faith that is active enough that from you has sounded out the word of the Lord. I'm thankful for you that you're serving in a time that's difficult. I'm thankful for what you do. Now, back quite a few years ago, I tried to become more thankful. And I found out that the way to do that is to keep your eyes open. That's how we become more thankful. To look around and to see what's being done. Maybe it's in our behalf. Maybe somebody is doing something for us or to us. And so thus we need to be thankful. But maybe they're doing it to somebody else. And we see that. And we don't have to make a big pretense. We don't have to make a big show about it. We don't have to wrap the box up in a big bow, but we can go up and quietly say something to them, or we can drop them a note, or we can make a phone call to them. I thank you for this. I thank you for that. Look what you've done. Look how you've blessed me, and look how you've blessed others. We simply sit and we simply look and we simply thank people. It was the year 1860. It was Lake Michigan. It was about this time of year, bitterly cold. The wind was howling. A boat with 300 passengers on it was trying to cross Lake Michigan. The waves beat upon that old boat so that basically through the storm, it ended up sinking. Most of the passengers were lost. As some of the passengers were able to come to swim and were able to make it to shore, there was a young college student by the name of Edward Spencer. He was seeing what was going on, and so he swam out to rescue. That night, before he brought the last one that he could to shore, and collapsed in complete exhaustion, he had brought 17 individuals to shore. It was several days later from the time he collapsed to the time he woke up. And when he woke up, his brother was there. And one of the things that Spencer said was, "Did I do good?" And his brother assured him he did good. But for all the rest of the days of his life, Spencer was, if you will, haunted, as he said, by seeing the faces of individuals that he knew when he came, as he grabbed one, when he came back, they wouldn't be there, and they knew that. They knew that they were dying, they were drowning, and they would die very quickly, very soon. And those images haunted him all the rest of the days of his life. But someone asked him years later, what was the biggest hurt or regret of the day? And he said, "Well, I saved 17 individuals." And they said, "Yes, you were written up in newspapers, said to be a hero." But he said, "The thing that hurt me the most is I never received any appreciation from the 17 that I saved." How many folks do things to us and for us? Some will never be able to appreciate. Back some time ago, Suzanne and I went through a drive-thru. This has been quite a while back. We went through the drive-thru, and when we did, I went to pay, and the individual said, "No, the person in front of you bought your meal." Now, I don't know how many more behind them they paid for. I know that at least we tried to think, and we didn't recognize the vehicle that had been in front of us. Somebody, out of the niceness of their heart, paid. We weren't able to express appreciation except to God, to bless that individual for the good that they've showed to us. But anytime folks show us anything, we need to learn to express and to give that gift of appreciation. And we can do that all year long. But then thirdly, there's the gift of praise or a compliment. The gift of praise or a compliment is a great gift. Why? Because it tells that individual, hey, I saw what you did. Not only am I thankful for it, but you're doing a fantastic job. The gift of praise or the gift of a compliment is sort of like oil in a car. You ever tried to run oil or run a car without oil? Suzanne and I, when we first got married, we didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. Matter of fact, we couldn't find 2 nickels. But we had to buy a car because while I came to the marriage with a car, bless my wife's heart, she didn't. And we had to find her something because it was going to be hard to walk to work every day if we didn't find her a vehicle. We found one fairly cheap. I can tell you why it was cheap. It was sorry. But one day, the oil light came on. We carried it, or Suzanne was driving it. She carried it to the gas station where one of the elders of the congregation that I was working for at the time was working. Matter of fact, owned. But the guy that came out to check the car was not a mechanic. He just put gas in the car. But Suzanne, he came out and he said, "What's wrong?" And she told him, and he said, "Okay." And so he said, "Well, pop the hood." She did. He checked. He said, "No, it's got oil in it." Bless Mickey's heart, he didn't think about there's an oil pump. And so he told her to go on and drive it, and she did. Well, no oil in an engine will eventually kill the engine. But oil in the engine does what? Well, it lubricates it, and it keeps everything running smoothly within the engine. A compliment to someone does just that. It keeps that engine running and running smoothly without knocks. Because all of a sudden someone sees value in what they're doing and sees worth in what they're doing, and that they're not living a life in vain. That what they're trying and the service that they're rendering and what they're giving to others is truly that. It is a service. It is something that they're giving, but they're trying to inspire, to help someone else. Mark Twain said he could live 2 months on a good compliment. You know, that's true of any of us. We like to be patted on. We like to be told we're doing good. We like to be told you're all right and what you're doing is a good job. In Isaiah 35, Isaiah the prophet reminds us in verse 3 that we're to strengthen the weak hands and we're to make firm the feeble knees. That we're to exhort one another, Hebrews chapter 3, verse 13. That we are to be individuals that edify one another, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. That we're to be folks that lift up others in their bad times and in their good times. But we lift them up by saying, hey, you look good today. Or, hey, you know, I like the little lilt in your voice. It sounds good. Or, boy, you match that outfit well. Or, hey, your hair looks nice today. Or, I sure did like this, or I like that. You did a good job with this, or you did a good job with that. That gift cost you nothing. But it sure made somebody's day. It sure picked them up. It sure made them feel better. A little boy at home one day, he and his mom, and he'd pretty much tried her patience. You know, he'd had one of those days where he was just as rambunctious and full of vim, vigor, and vitality in life, and he'd sucked it all out of Mom all day long. She finally was able to put him to bed that night. When she did, she tucked him in. Her weary voice, her weary lips, she kissed him on the forehead. She said, now you go to sleep. And she walked outside the door. And she stood there for a minute to see if he was going to get out of bed or if he was going to stay. And she heard him praying to God. God, help my mama to see when I do something good. And it is there that she realized what she needed to do the rest of his days. And she did. The great gift of praise means so much to the individual that receives it. It validates them. It reminds them. It reminds them of who they are and where they're going. Give the gift of praise. But how about the gift of affection? You can give that gift. It's an easy gift. It's the idea of loving one another. Now, I heard one man say one time, he said, I love you because the Bible tells me to. Well, yeah, it does. John 13, Jesus says, by this shall all men know that you are my disciples if you have love one for another. John himself wrote in 1 John chapter 4 that if God so loved us, we ought to also to love one another. And so, yeah, the Bible teaches us to love one another. But this individual said, but I don't have to like you. I disagree. And I disagree wholeheartedly with that individual. The idea of loving would include the idea of liking. The idea of loving is the idea of wanting what is best for someone else. If I love my wife, I want what is best for her. And if she loves me, she wants what is best for me. And then that love expresses itself in the things that we do, in the way that we act, the way that we treat each other. Now, go beyond husband and wife. Go beyond family to folks that you see maybe on a daily basis. You work with them. Or maybe folks that you see only occasionally. You still have that command to love one another. Love says, I would do for you what I can to the best of my ability. Anything that you'll ask of me. Love says, what is it you need? Okay, I'll fill that hole. Love is that which is given not just at Christmas time with a nice package that has been well thought out and beautifully wrapped. But the gift of love, the gift of affection, of being and willing and able to say, I love you and here's what I have for you. Here's what I want to give you. Because I love you. Because I think a lot of you. I think that you are important to me. Be kindly affectioned one to another with brotherly love and honor, serving one another. You know, Romans chapter 12, Paul talks about our responsibilities to God, our responsibilities to self, our responsibilities to others. And he says, you be kindly affectioned one to another. You give preference one to another. That you truly love. Now, do we need to further define love? Do we need to look at 1 Corinthians 13 and see all the characteristics, all the earmarks and the traits that note our love and what love really is? I don't think so. Oh, it helps. And it helps from time to time to be reminded of those things and to read about those things. But yet we understand this is what love is. And, you know, it's really easy to love, like I say, love our family members, to love our spouses, to love our children, to love our grandchildren, to love even our nieces and nephews, our cousins. Oh, sometimes we get at odds at them and with them. But it's not long before we, if you will, kiss and make up. But in the church, and with those not only that are part of our church family, but those that are our neighbors and our friends and our co-workers and those folks that we love and we come in contact with. What a wonderful gift to give is the gift of love. I care for you. I care about you. And I want to help you in any way possible. But then there's the gift, and we have left, if you will, what I think is the cherry to put on top. And this sums it up for me. It's the gift of yourself. You see, really, the greatest gifts are not necessarily the gifts that have the highest price tag on them. But they're the gifts that come from the heart. They're the gifts that oftentimes, like we said, don't cost you. Gift of appreciation, gift of listening, the gift of praise, the gift of love. They all come from you. They are you giving yourself to them. In the book of 2 Corinthians, the 8th chapter, Paul talks about the churches there in Macedonia. And it's an interesting concept. There's been some discussion. I've had discussion with folks through the years, but my understanding of the first 5 verses there of 2 Corinthians chapter 8 is that those churches were going through very difficult times. You go back over especially into 1 Thessalonians and to Acts, you'll see that there were some times of tribulation, times of oppression. There were times where we might even say depression from the standpoint of economically. These folks didn't have a lot. And even in their want, even in their lack of what they had, they were willing to give and then give some more. You know, they didn't just give what they thought was appropriate, but they gave and then they said, okay, let me give a little more. And Paul thanked them for that. For that even in their want, they were willing to give. But then he says down in verse 5, one of those verses that we as preachers have often used through the years to talk about dedication and commitment. And I think in many ways it fits. But I want you to resonate this verse within your mind, within the thinking and the context of today. Where Paul said this they did, not as we'd hoped, but they first gave themselves to the Lord. Paul says, here's the first thing they did in their want, but in their willingness to give to others. Here's what they did. They first gave themselves. All of us live in a very small world. Now you might say, oh, no, we don't. Preacher, you hadn't driven around Nashville in quite a while. You think we all live in a very small world. No, we all live in a very small world. It's called self. It's important, though, that we get out of our little world of self and we look to others. And we see what we can do to help others. It's important that we give ourselves. And we give ourselves to others. When we do that, here's a concept that we don't think about. But when we give ourselves to others, do you really know who we are also giving ourselves to? The Lord. We often think, well, we give ourselves to the Lord when we come to church on Sunday. Well, do you know the amount of time that we have to put in on worship and the amount of time that we put in on study and the amount of time that we put in on doing what the Lord would have us to do? But remember these words. Inasmuch as you've done it unto these, the least, these my brethren. What did the Lord say? You've done it unto me. Therefore, as we give gifts through this year, let us be mindful that all gifts don't have to cost. And we can give gifts not just at Christmas time and not just at birthdays. We can give gifts all year long. And while Jesus reminds us to give and to give a good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. And notice what He promises in Luke 6, verse 38. It will be given to you. Paul said it this way. Whatever a man sows, that shall he also reap. Galatians 6, verse 7. Here's the point. The point is that what we give, we ultimately get back. A young girl stayed after the bell rang and all the other students ran out of the room and stayed behind and asked her teacher for a few minutes. And the teacher said, most definitely. The teacher said, what do you need, hon? She said, well, I just need to tell you some things. My mother has a boyfriend that's living in our house now. And he's not very nice to me. My dad has a new girlfriend and he doesn't have time for me. My brother is on drugs and he's in and out of trouble all the time. And so the teacher looked at her and said, what can I do for you? And she said, I just wish somebody would hug me. Let's stop. Let's be mindful that there are gifts that we can give every day of the year. But let us be mindful to give those gifts and to give them from the heart of love that God has told us. The love that God has told us to share with others is also the love that God has given to us. And as He's given it to us, He's told us to love Him enough to walk with Him daily, to become His child by being baptized for the remission of our sins as we've changed the direction of our life to following Him, and we've confessed before others that we believe that His Son, Jesus, is the Son of God. Being baptized, thus, we've come in contact with that blood of Christ. John reminds us is the blood that forgives us, that the Hebrew writer says washes away our sins. That's the gift that's been given to us and for us. Maybe you need to do those things, or maybe you need to rededicate your life. You look at yourself and where you stand, and if we can help you in any way, won't you come? All together we stand and sing.